that he really hates the child of God who is being conformed into the image of Christ. And all the instruments of this world, whether we're talking about politically or whether we're talking about religiously or financially, I believe that all the systems in this world are drawing down to the day when they're going to turn all their guns against the church. We are the number one enemy of this world. We're what's holding back the one world government. That's what all the systems are pushing for. While it's not politically correct to say anything bad about a Muslim or a Hindu or a homosexual or somebody of alternate lifestyle, it's popular, as the preacher said, to run down the Bible-believing child of God that wants to live right and do right and preach the Word of God. And they're going to do their best to force their way into higher-type churches one way or another. That's what the systems are meant to do. Destroy God's Word. But I would narrow it down even further. He's not only out to get man in general, he's out to get the church, but honey, I want you to know that the devil's got him a little workshop pretty close to you. And you may have seen some sparks flying when you left the house. It may be in the house and you've said, oh, this ain't going to be good. The devil's working, honey. He may be working in the marriage. He may be working in one of your young'uns. He may be working on the job. He may be working preachers. He may be working in the church. That's right. You feel the heat coming off the sparks as he's grinding. You can hear the sound and sizzle of it. And you've already said, this can't be good. He knows what it takes to bring you down individually. He knows that we're human and we're flesh, and he knows he can. And so he's worked. Don't listen. Don't underestimate him. He's got something in mind that is really going to be marvelous to defeat you if he can. That is not only the invention of this sword, but that is the intention of this sword. If it has its way, it will sever the head of David and many other of the children of God. While these things that I've mentioned are not necessarily evil in themselves, if used wrongly, they can all become evil. This is the intention of the devil and the intention of this world. But I bring you to my last thought. Not only do we see the invention of this sword, not only do we see the intention of this sword, but thank God I want to bring to your attention what I call the intervention of this sword. Amen. How through divine providence, God is able to take that which the world has wrought and devil has orchestrated and the enemy has made so perfect, and they're able to do what David said when he said, give me that. And I'm glad that in my life and in your life, there have been some swords that have been sharp, and they have intended to end us, but God came along just in time, and he said, give me that. Now understand, the Lord doesn't need the devil, but he does hire him to do his work, and he won't pay. And just about the time the devil gets done with it, the Holy Ghost will come by and say, give me instruments made of the children of Cain. They made those things, and obviously God come by and said, looks pretty good. Let me have that. Let me have that. You say, well, how do you know that? Brother Lance just testified. I talked to him enough to know that every note of music he ever learned, the devil taught him. That's the truth. He learned it in the home. a fellow played a saxophone as pretty as you ever heard. Some of the old hymns. I said, that's beautiful. He said, that's my sword. I said, what do you mean? He said, the devil taught me how to play that. And God saved me, and I never thought I'd use it again. The Holy Ghost said, praying for me. And He said, I'm going to use it for God. Amen. I think about all that gold and that silver that Egypt perfected down there. Took all the dross out of it so they could formulate and cover their gods. But when the Lord brought His children out of there, He said, I want you to spoil them people and get that gold out of there. I'm going to go out in the wilderness and build me a house. I'm going to use the devil's gold. Situations around your life, in your children's life, it just looks bad. It looks bad. Maybe the Holy Ghost is making a testimony. The devil said, get the sharpest thorn in the bush there, brother. Be my messenger and go out there after Paul. And what is the head resurrection? God intercepted and said, give me that thorn. I believe that'll work to get the grace of God at the time for thousands and thousands of years. Don't hurt nobody. Don't mess with it. Said I'm going to do no any hair split every day. I'm going to do it. I was raised back in the hills of West Virginia. My dad was an alcoholic. I've mentioned that, I guess, since I've been here. Mother left when I was a year and a half old. Dad never remarried. I was raised in that environment. I was the youngest of 9 children. And all I ever seen was drunkenness and cursing and fighting, all that stuff in the home. Children around the area, though they didn't live in no high-class situations, they weren't allowed to buy houses because of what they knew went on. This fellow I preached for up in Canton, Ohio. He called me one day and said, "Preacher, you're not going to believe this." I said, "What is it?" He said, "A lady came here to visit the church this morning. She's going out and shaking hands, asked her where she's from. She said, West Virginia." He said, "I don't know why I asked her. But I said to her, 'Do you know a Dana Williams?' And said, her eyes lit. She said, 'I sure do.' And said, 'Preacher, we lived just not far from them.' But she said, 'We was scared to go by there. We never knew whether somebody would be shooting a gun, throwing a rock, or fighting, or whatever would come out.'" That was the total environment. Never had heard the gospel, never read one verse of the Bible, none of that, had no church connection at all. And I'm sure the devil thought he had that whole crowd. I've already married 3 brothers because of alcohol. That was the vice. I've got a sister who's got cirrhosis of the liver. I've got another brother that's got it. Looks like they'll go down there, and God and His mercy don't stop them. And that's been the history of my family. And I'm sure that everybody said there ain't nothing good going to come out of that. Ain't nothing good come out of that. But I'm here to tell you, I several years ago. I'd heard of a dear lady that had been friends with her back when she left. And so I went by that house. She had already passed away. Her husband was alive and a good Christian, loved the Lord. He since went to heaven. And I sat down and talked to him, and we discussed some things. He said, "Young man, I want to tell you something." He said, "Back years ago, your mama had a baby. Don't know which one of you it was. My wife wanted to go by and visit. Said, I took her out on Bunker Hill, let her out. She went up to the house where your mama was to see the baby. Said, I looked across the road and I saw your daddy over there, Foxy they called him, and he was laying block. And said, I knew what he was doing. He had traded the old farm for that piece of land, and he was building a bar close to the table. But it said, just to make conversation while I was waiting, I pulled over there and I said, Foxy, what are you doing? He said, I'm building a church. He said, yeah, I bet you are. And he said, my dad, you'd have known him, cursed real big and said, that's what I said, wasn't it? I'm building a church. He went ahead and built that building. About 2 years later, he shot a man in it and killed him. He had to sell everything he had to keep out going, pay the lawyers and keep him going to prison. Guess who bought the building? I'm talking about turning things around. Yes. Huh? A church bought it. For 50-some years, it's been a church. I can't help but think that the Lord told him, said, lay that block real good now. I was back there in West Virginia preaching a funeral. And fella came to the funeral that I knew when I was being raised up there, one of my close friends I hadn't seen since then. I got to talking to him and I said, Mike, do you know the Lord? He said, I sure do. I'm saved, Brother Dana. I said, well, I don't have time now, but when I get home, I'll call you and find out about all of it. I got back home, I called him on the phone, I said, Brother Mike, man, it's good to hear that you're saved. And I said, tell me about it. He said, oh, Brother Dana, he said, you know that church out there on Bunker Hill? I said, I sure do. I didn't tell my daddy, did I? He said, is it having a 2-week meeting? Somebody invited me as a 16-year-old boy, and I went there and got born again. I said, hallelujah. My old drunk daddy built a church for the next 3 years. Hey. The children of Israel had analyzed that sword. They knew all about it. They guessed the way on it. And you know that old Goliath figured that out. And he wanted to intimidate him. And could you imagine the night before the fight? It echoes down across that valley, and the children of Israel are scared to death every time he does it.
Right.
He said, I was even put down. I said, sleep like, listen, Dad. He's just doing it to get back in.
Right.
I'm the king. I'm fighting if it wasn't for that.
That's for sure.
The devil's in that thing. Have you seen how mean that thing looks?
Yeah.
I don't see he sharpens for a while and then he lays it down. By the time he lays it down, the providence of God nudges him and says, pick that thing back up and sharpen it on the other side. I got a 16-year-old boy going to use that tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Amen. Don't worry about what the devil's doing in his workshop. You say, Lord, what's happening in Washington? Pay it no mind. All this world can do is get us ready for it. It may be he's out there working on something near your house. He never has a clue what God's going to do. Because if he didn't, you think he'd have sent that? You think he'd have sent that thorn if he'd have known what Paul was going to preach out of it? You think Haman built those houses if he knew what God was going to do with it? You think Egypt would have purified that gold if he knew what was going to happen to it? You think the devil's young and the music to preach from Brother Lance is going to sing and play like it does? Old fella ain't got a clue. It's just getting things ready in your life for the Lord to come along and say, amen. All right, that's enough right there. I think that's all we need right there. I think you're done with that. I think I'm ready. Give me faith. It's about 2,000 years ago. Some old boys went back in the woods and cut a tree. They hewed it out in 2 pieces. Come on, Peter said that by wicked hands. Wicked hands. They meant it for evil. They put that thing together and they called it a cross. It looked mean. Had evil intentions. And the Lord came by and said, I believe I can use it. I'll take that up on the outside of Jerusalem and hang that sun on it. He said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men. He said, ye by wicked hands have crucified the Lord of glory, but God has lifted him up. It ain't over. David said, yeah, give me that. So there's nothing like it. They just something around a good old fresh testimony where the devil's had his hand in it. God took it away. Give me all right, let's stand. Brother Lance, come give us some of that devil's music. Whether in a heavenly king, go with us, brother. Give me some of that devil's music. Send her in a heavenly king. I don't know what you might need this morning. Maybe the Lord's wanting to give you something. You thought it was over with, but He's fixing to take it out of the devil's hands. Won't you just come and trust the Lord with it? It may be that son or that daughter, maybe that job or whatever it is. Just come and ask the Lord to take control of it. While He's singing, you be obedient. Go ahead, Brother Lance.